Welcome to Forgotten Islam. The Taliban, a supposedly Islamic group who have sought to get rid of foreign invasion of Afghanistan, hope to install the Sharia law system and bring peace and prosperity to the Afghani people. The word Taliban in both the Pashto and Arabic languages means students, whilst also naming themselves the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. A reason for this name was due to studying abroad in madrasas in Pakistan. In order to succeed in their goals, the only viable option the Taliban have found was to declare war upon the foreign invaders that had come and fought them in their own land. This leads to our next point on the remarkable history of Afghanistan and the subsequent rise of the Deobandi Islamic movement, Taliban. Before discussing the history of Afghanistan, we must discuss the strategical importance of the region. One of the most important aspects of Afghanistan's geopolitical significance is that it holds some of the most desirable resources that every capitalist country dreams of. From crude oil, gas to minerals, which are worth more than $1 trillion according to some estimates. Furthermore, it borders 8 countries including major ones like Pakistan, Iran and India, making it a crucial route that the Western nations like the US need to access to in order to keep control and dominance over the region. While it may be a landlocked country, we must recall that the ancient Silk Road passes through Afghanistan, meaning that Afghanistan holds lots of power over products that may want to reach Southeastern or Eastern Asia. Therefore, they can decide what enters their airspace and what cannot. This also means that instability and insecurity within the region can destabilize the area and provide fertile ground for obstacles which pose a threat to Western interests and their allies. For these reasons, other nations have sought authority over Afghanistan, whether it be the Soviets, the Russian Republic or the Americans with their proxy and cowardly president, Ashraf Ghani. After discussing its strategical gravity, we can now take a look at the previous and current history of the graveyards of empires, Afghanistan. In 1919, Afghanistan was recognized as an independent sovereign country after being a British protectorate whilst also being passively under the direct influence of the Russians. The Third Anglo-Afghan War had begun after another 2 conflicts arose between the superpower and the developing nation, which were in 1839 to 1842 and 1878 to 1880. The main purpose of these wars was to expand the Imperial British Empire, who desired Afghanistan as a wealthy colony but also drive out the Russian influence which resided there. The first war resulted in the victory of the Afghan people, followed by a second war which was won by the British and resulted in some territories falling to Imperial Britain, which was finally followed by a third and conclusive war which resulted in the Treaty of Rawalpindi between Afghanistan and the British Empire. Afghanistan carried on as an independent emirate until 1926 when they became the Kingdom of Afghanistan. Prior to 1919, Afghanistan was under the Durrani Empire, who were preceded by the Hotak Empire, who gave their pledge of allegiance to the Islamic Caliphate. Historically, Afghanistan was liberated by the Muslims in 642 AD by Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anh, which truly displays how far back Islam was rooted in the Afghani people. Around 5 decades after the events of 1919, in 1978, the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan was established, a pro-communist government whose objective was to provide peace and opulence to the country. The PDPA, or People's Democratic Republic of Afghanistan, had ousted the former Republic of Afghanistan in the Sur Revolution, removing the regime of Muhammad Dawood Khan. As a result of continued resentment against Dawood's autocratic rule, close ties with the USSR and economic downturn because of blockade imposed by Pakistan, Dawood Khan was asked to resign. Dawood was first revered as the great modern leader due to removing the monarchy and announcing himself as the first modern president of Afghanistan. However, due to his firm, unwavering absolute rule, people could no longer stand him as their leader. While the idea of moving Afghanistan towards socialism was proclaimed, completing the task was seen as an arduous road. Thus, Afghanistan's foreign minister commented that Afghanistan was a democratic but not yet socialist republic, while a member of the Politburo of the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan predicted that Afghanistan will not see socialism in my lifetime, in an interview with a British journalist in 1981. In conclusion, this new government was a socialist country following more Marxist-Leninist ideologies. The new government, called the DRA or the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan, would soon lose control, as only 1 year after their establishment the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in 1979. This was a result of the new government forging better relations with the Soviet government, who saw this as an opportunity to increase their influence over the vicinity. Following many political reforms, most notably the marriage and education reforms made by the President of Afghanistan, Mohammad Taraki, conflicted with the Islamic values held by many Afghani Pashtun tribesmen and villagers. The DRA lacked any real control over the country, so instead responded to the resistance with severe and harsh repression, which only largened the sparked rebellions and movements. As years passed, the DRA started to lose dominance over their own land as the rebel movements began uniting and becoming much more powerful within the nation state. Collectively, the rebels were named the Mujahideen. Ironically, at this time, the American government were funding the Mujahideen to help them against the pesky subordinate DRA allies and the Soviets. It was completely contradictory for USA's interests to allow Soviet influence over such a valuable country which they could exploit themselves. Similarly, this period in which these events occurred is called the Cold War, in which the US and the Soviet Union are arch rivals who are trying to prevent any influence or victory for each other. Either way, although the Afghan regime sought aid from the Soviets using a treaty made between the two states, the Soviets weren't truly keen nor eager to enter any direct conflict. However, due to a sour relation that began to build up between the Afghani President Mohammad Taraki and the Prime Minister Hafizullah Amin, which climaxed quickly, soon culminating with the assassination of President Taraki. Now that Taraki was out of the way, Amin tried to undo some of the despised reforms of President Taraki, although it was much too late. Amin was a disliked leader and held absolutely no power in the countryside. The Soviets recognized this and saw Amin as a weak and volatile leader, hence were worried about an Islamic state which may appear due to the weakness of the fragile government, which could cause unrest within Soviet Asia. They therefore chose to assassinate the Prime Minister Hafizullah Amin, which they successfully managed. Amin was assassinated on the 29th of December 1979 in the presidential palace. For another decade after this event, the Mujahideen and the Soviets carried on fighting in Afghanistan until 1989. By this time, the Soviets became fed up, not only because of the fierce resistance they faced from the Mujahideen forces who were backed by the US, but also due to the fact that they were rapidly disintegrating and had lost around 15,000 soldiers trying to take Afghanistan. Despite having failed to implement a puppet regime in Afghanistan, in 1988 the Soviet Union signed an accord with the United States, Pakistan and Afghanistan and agreed to withdraw its troops. The Soviet withdrawal was completed on February 15, 1989 and Afghanistan returned to its previous status. Before proceeding, one may ask, how can such a country have such a built-up love for fighting in Allah's path and conjure up such piety that cannot be found in the wider Muslim world? The reason for this is simply because they adopted Islam when they were liberated by the Muslims in the early years of Islam, meaning Islam is deeply rooted within them, so much that even a harsh communist regime for years could not suppress that belief. However, this doesn't apply to the whole population, as some seek freedom and rights for a Western secular government which they believe hasn't been fulfilled. Anyway, now that's clear, let's proceed with the history we were discussing. Following the withdrawal of the Soviets in 1989, Afghanistan continued a civil war between the Mujahideen and the communist Afghan government. These conflicts and skirmishes lasted until 1992 when the government was overthrown. A new government sponsored by various rebel groups arose as an Islamic republic, although it was short-lived. President Burhanuddin Rabbani, leader of Jamiyat-e-Islami, a major Mujahideen group, refused to leave office in accordance with the power-sharing arrangement reached by the new government. Other Mujahideen groups, particularly a group named Hizb Islami, surrounded Kabul and began to barrage the city with artillery and rockets. These attacks continued intermittently over the next several years as the countryside outside Kabul slipped into chaos. Furthermore, this new government, instead of being Islamic, was actually quite corrupt. According to the words of a highly educated Afghan citizen, Rahmatullah Nawruz, the country was pretty much split due to nationalistic reasons. Within the country, different ethnic groups defined their own territories, splitting the nation into pieces. There were also many warlords who held autonomy over their regions, where rape and crime were common throughout the country, leaving it in a complete mess. In part 2 of the Afghanistan series, we will explore the rise of the Taliban, the US invasion of Afghanistan, and the current situation of the country. If you enjoyed, please like, share and subscribe for more videos in the future. If you also want to access more of our content, please check us out on Facebook at Forgotten Islam page and Instagram as Forgotten_Islam.